To Be Hero X is the biggest surprise anime since quite a long time now. Rarely do I go into an anime with normal expectations and it goes and exceeds them, and by this much. I went into it with exactly zero expectations because a good friend of mine recommended it to me and I had never heard of it before. But that first episode hooked me in so fast and so hard that it automatically set me up to continue the rest of the show. Something that the following episodes alone would not be able to do, but more on that in a bit. There were two main reasons that hook was so strong. First, the production quality, because oh my god, it is so impressive. The masterful animation, the different yet amazing art styles, and the absolute banger of an opening. And second is that I'm always intrigued by superhero shows that subvert the typical storytelling of that genre, ever since ones such as Invincible, The Boys, and I could even say My Hero Academia. Anything that's not Marvel, basically. But truth be told, as the show went on, I would have probably dropped it if not for that hook and my friend telling me it's worth it to continue. And boy, am I so freaking glad I did. But that's the reason for this video today. I want to discuss the pacing, structure, and other small issues of To Be Hero X that to me held it from reaching the heights of the all-time greats. Honestly, it kind of did, but later in its runtime than it should have. And I implore you, before you go on and say I do not understand the show and how dare I criticize it, please keep in mind that I am doing this out of love for this show more than anything. If you want me to praise it, there's so much I could say, much more than I would in this video, but there's many other places for that. I feel it wouldn't be as productive of a discussion, but don't worry, I'll do a bit of praising anyway. It was exactly the same with my Returnal critique. I cared so much for what that game was doing that I proceeded to make a video about it, which should naturally signal care, and here is no different. With that said, let's proceed. From here on out, it's spoilers territory, so consider that your warning. The structure of To Be Hero X is unique to say the least, basically packaging its episodes into mini shows that each focus on a specific hero within the world. It goes something like this. It's 4 episodes for the story of Nice, but actually Ling Ling, his ex-impersonator, and then 3 episodes of Yang Xing, aka the new E-Soul, and then 3 to Lucky Cyan, and what is in my opinion where the show starts to dip hard in terms of engagement. 2 to Queen and Boa, if you really think about it. 2 to the hero Lolly, and then 1 committed to Ghostblade, and now we're 15 episodes in. And this is where the show really starts to flourish its wings, partly because that previous structure has been slowly crumbling till it basically diminished where we're at. Well, actually, not really. There's episode 17 dedicated to Little Johnny's backstory, and episode 23 dedicated to Ahu's original story. Otherwise, Dragon Boy, Smile, and X just get dripped a couple of minutes to be introduced. And that is our main cast. Now, here's my main issue with To Be Hero X, is that it sabotages itself with its structure. The packaged mini-shows of Nice, E-Soul, and Lucky Cyan work well on their own. Heck, they can even make up their own shows if expanded, but that was not what happened. Instead, I kept facing abrupt interruptions that felt like the show had no clear overarching goal, yet ever so slightly hinting at one. Nor was it leaning towards a sort of anthology series where each package is nicely self-contained. Yeah, each had their meaning behind them, but we're never tied up. It was trying to do both, and instead it delivered to me neither. Again, the episodes themselves were still good and interesting to watch, and definitely a spectacle for the eyes, but by the time the Lucky Cyan story came, the confusion definitely made it harder for me to stick through it. Especially her story, honestly. Felt the most disconnected and odd of the bunch. It said some stuff for later, sure, but again, why craft disconnected stories far from each other to combine them later on, when we can interweave them within each other, especially with the fact that To Be Hero X's goal is exactly that, as we saw how it did it amazingly in the latter third of its runtime. What doesn't help is that rarely do the stories of each hero relate to the future ones. That doesn't happen until further in the show, so I'm sitting here like, that all there is to it? Especially when I look at the opening and see so many heroes that still didn't appear yet. And I'm looking at you specifically, X. You appear for most of the opening and barely appear in the show. Lucky Cyan contributes to being the cool reference to the singer that everyone in the show later on listens to apparently, and nicely just there for advertisements. And Lin Ling who? But E-Soul's arc, I'm saving that for later because it deserves special treatment. But going from Queen's story and afterwards, the show seems to really find its strong identity, starts to skyrocket to greatness exponentially. I wish it had done so from the beginning with Nice and E-Soul, kind of interweaving the story, but from then on, the build-up culminates in the alien ship expedition, which unraveled how everything was interconnected all along, and answered a few mysterious shots from past episodes, and then further culminating into probably the best ending episode of an anime season I have ever witnessed. I cannot think of another ending episode that nailed every damn element so well. It is so rare to find an episode not only filled with hype, not only having some of the best written, choreographed and animated scenes, not only having great pacing and perfect story drops, but also ending the season perfectly. Not on a cliffhanger, not on a seemingly nosy plot twist, just a great ending that gets you excited for what's next while wrapping what happened so far nicely. But this is still a critique. That last third of the show has a problem of cramming things a bit. A byproduct of taking its sweet ass time in the beginning, if you ask me. 2 or 3 more episodes to stretch and flesh out some stuff would have done it wonders. Someone like Dragon Boy, who was in the top 10 all along, was basically introduced exactly when the story needed. Would have loved to see more of Current Smile and Ahu making an earlier appearance but being built afterwards, which would have fit with the rest of the show. The introduction of the last couple of heroes in general, except X's kind of, would have benefited from more time and being weaved into more episodes. It's not like that was needed, they are still great, but they do feel off ever so slightly. Not only was the structure the reason for my confusion throughout the show, it was further exacerbated by it telling important story beats or hinting at them in a manner that I would describe as too subtle. Sometimes they weren't, and that's when I felt rewarded for noticing, but those moments were rare. A show that rewards you for paying attention and watching smartly is a great element, do not get me wrong, but when combined with really subtle story bits, the disconnected and directionless beginning, and the weekly episode releases, and you can see how it falls a bit flat. As an opposing point to this though, I can totally see how this makes the experience of following the show week to week and participating in its discussions, theorizing about what's next, enhances the experience heavily. Unfortunately, I joined late to the party, especially on the hero voting that happened. An example of that subtlety is the Spotlight organization. Where do I even begin? They are actually mentioned from episode 1, but I've never noticed that until I skimmed through the show again for this video. It's mentioned in this very important shot, right after this big fight while 2 characters are in dialogue. If we actually go into my interpretation of it, I've never grasped the concept of that organization fully. I knew they existed in the background, but I didn't connect them to their name. I definitely did not get their motivation or actions much at the time. They dabbled in fear and didn't like heroes. That's the extent of my understanding. And the continuous slight hinting that this dude Liu Zhang, Queen's father, question mark, because I never figured if he was or not, is that he is the leader, which is only revealed directly in a 3-second shot. Nowhere else is this problem highlighted than Isol's arc, because oh my, crosses the line from subtle to frustratingly obscure. The actual meaning that you can grasp from it is wonderful, but you really have to go through some hoops, and I do not mean that that meaning is symbolized or deeply rooted. To me, it felt that I had to guess instead, like asking, alright, what would the writers have meant here if they were aiming for a great story? And then I went with that. And that's when you arrive at concepts of tragedy and manipulation and how they interplay with each other. But on paper, on the actual show, without the guessing, I'm sorry, there's not much there. I could never definitively tell you what any character in that arc was thinking or what their motivations were. Yang Xing suddenly crashes out and chooses violence, proceeding to be a bad guy for the rest of the show. But why choose to fight old Isol? Does he think he's not doing his part? Does he want his power and trust value for himself? Is it a moment of just lashing out in anger? All of this when especially he didn't seem like a bad guy at all. What about old Isol himself? Why accept the fight? Why choose not to speak out at any opportunity he was given? What about Rock? Did he plan this out from the start or utilize an opportunity presented to him when Yang Xing rose to fame? Is he actually his uncle? What did Yang Xing do about him then? Did he always know he was the CEO of MG? So many questions, I know. None of them answered. And yes, I know we all answer them in our own headcanon, and it's nice to leave some stuff open for interpretation, but to me, that's the whole arc open for interpretation. I've seen people like it honestly, and I respect that. But yeah, unfortunately, I did not like it as much. Especially as time went on, because the show threw Isol not only out of the tournament at the end, but out of the whole show, bro. All the heroes get some appearance here or there in the later episodes, but my homie comes in one fight and doesn't say a word, then fucks off. Nothing from those 3 episodes seemed to connect anywhere else. These problems, though, seep from the arcs themselves to the overall writing. Now, the premise for the show is actually wonderful. An idea of a system that gives heroes power based on trust is really cool. And seeing that it automatically plays into this sort of influencer mentality in this capitalistic manner is completely valid. And I truly can't think of any other way this would play out in our real world than companies manipulating the narrative and investing their resources to give rise to new heroes under them. On the other hand, the idea of fear is not as solidly written or presented. Its rules aren't established, and it feels more like it pops up for the convenience of the story than being an ever-existing element of it. For example, in episode 1, the evil businessman is shown to have accumulated fear in others in his life, which gave him power, but also says he found something that allowed him to use it, calling it the light. And when Lucky Cyan's orphanage gets infected by fear, it's sort of hinted that the water might be corrupted with fear, but it's also hinted that it's caused by the bad reputation of the orphanage. In these cases, I can't determine which is which. Boa seemed to have been infected by fear maybe by her own emotions, but with DJ Shindig, he needed to be experimented on for a period of time to be infected. Yet with Smile, he got infected with immediate contact with a lot of fear goo. And Nice didn't get affected by little bits of that same fear goo. There's actually quite a few more plot holes within the world and its systems. For example, how wasn't Lighter describing Nice's perfection as fake packaging? And how was Nice intent on killing and had a big mental episode when his identity necessitates him to be perfect? Sure, we could slide that one and maybe say it's external perfection, but I would imagine just like Firm Man not being able to sit down, maybe Nice would still feel horrible inside but cannot show it, which is not what is happening here because my guy was tweaking. Also, need I mention that there's literally aliens in this show and their material nullifies the powers of trust and fear somehow? It might not be that much of a plot hole though, and they might expand on it later, but I cannot wait for To Be Hero X Season 2 to find out, honestly. Additionally, why are heroes, especially Nice, obedient and weak in front of his CEO? Aren't the heroes way stronger anyway? This is something The Boys has done really well. Bot has well and truly controlled their heroes, yes, but at the same time when they grow a little unstable, you can see the employees and their fear and anxiety of the situation because they are the best to know what the heroes are capable of. This was not really seen here. Again, I really just gave this my headcanon reason. Maybe it's just only Nice. Maybe the CEOs have powers too since they would naturally have trust value from being well known too. Who knows? And on the topic of CEOs, these four are really not given them much character. Sure, it helps them be mysterious, but for how large of a role they play in the story, the viewers are not given any reasoning or motivation as to why and how they do what they do, sometimes even what they do in the first place. Like FOMO's CEO, who's seemingly playing on his tablet all the time, and Mickey, who's always just smiling and seems to be in a perpetual state of pouring and preparing drinks. Anyway, the last episode hinted at an amazing season 2, with potentially having the interconnectedness we've been witnessing becoming an actual entity our cast will face off against, that being Fate. At least if my understanding was correct. And that's why I love anime originals, because nobody knows what they are going to do with the story next. Yep. After all of what I've said, I can safely say To Be Hero X so far is my favorite anime of 2025. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed, and I do not mind a dislike if you did not like it, but please be nice in telling me why. This is another video on a completely different topic. Even my channel has ADHD at this point, man.